So there really it relates to a few conversations that I had when they were very little. So in each case, the conversations were had with them when they were about 3.5. The first of which is with my eldest daughter. So like I say, she was about 3.5, and it was just the two of us sitting around a table playing with Play-Doh one afternoon. Her little brother was just a baby, so he was upstairs taking a nap, and Dad was out the house, and we were just sitting together. And she started looking a little bit sad, and then she looked up at me and she said, "Mummy, sometimes I really miss my father." And I kind of looked a bit sort of sideways at her. We don't use the word father, you know, she's 3.5, her dad is daddy, and that was kind of it, really. Right. So I said, "Mummy," I said, "Do you mean daddy?" I said, he's at work, but he'll be home in a couple of hours, so you can see him, so don't worry. She said, no, not daddy, my father. And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Because daddy's your father. You know, father is a word for daddy." And she said, no, not daddy. My father from before. My father with the white beard. And I was like, well, that's certainly not your dad, who's like in his 30s with jet black hair at the time. So I kind of said, "Well, you know, who do you mean?" And she said, "Yeah, no, my father from before with the white beard." And wow. I was a bit baffled. Yeah, a bit weird. And again, the use of the language was quite odd for a 3.5-year-old to kind of come out with. And so I started asking her questions about it. So I said, "Well, so tell me a bit more about who's your father? Who's this father that you're talking about?" And she said that she remembers him, he was very kind, and they lived together in a house made of wood. And she kind of described something that could be like a cabin or perhaps like a chalet or something like that. And she used to live in this house with her father, who had what she called a waist jacket with a watch on a chain that he kept in his pocket, which obviously I'm guessing means like a pocket watch in a waistcoat, you know. And she said that she could remember she lived in a house. The house was by some woods and near a river, and she used to play by the woods. And she could remember things like she remembers making bread in the house. Wow. And nobody else lived there. And then I was trying to ask her questions without leading her, because she was very little, and I kind of just wanted to know where this was going really and where it might have come from. Because apart from anything else, I thought I might have maybe I'd missed something she'd been watching, like a movie on TV or something, and I hadn't seen. And it was quite a specific set of memories that she came out with. And actually, the emotions that she was expressing seemed really genuine. She was really sad. She missed him, you know? But after a while, you know, no more information was sort of forthcoming, and we kind of just left it at that. I told her dad when he came home from work, and he was just as baffled as I was, and we couldn't really understand where it all come from, but we kind of let it be. And that was kind of that, except for about 3 weeks later, again, we were at home together, probably similar time, little brother having a nap, and she was climbing over the furniture. So she was trying to climb up the back of a chair to get to something I'd put on a shelf high up out of her reach. And I told her to get down. So get down, that's dangerous, get off the chair. And went off to do some other chore or other. And I came back and she was doing it again. So I sort of told her off. I said, "Look, that's really naughty. If I tell you not to do something, I'm telling you to keep you safe, because it's dangerous. Don't do it." And she looked at me solemnly and she went, "Yeah, that's like what happened to Frida, because her parents told her not to play in the river, and she did, and she hit her head and she died." And then she sort of went on to back to And at this point, my jaw was literally on the floor. And apart from anything else, you know, you think that's such an unusual name. You know, I don't think I've ever met anyone called Frida.
Yeah, certainly for the modern day, yeah, very unusual.
Yeah, very weird. And it kind of piqued my interest enough for me to remember, obviously, the conversation we'd had some weeks previously. And the next time I took her to nursery, so like preschool, I spoke to her, the member of staff that looked after her, and I said, "Look, you know, have you been reading any books or seeing anything recently with a character called Frida in it?" And she was like, "No." I said, "What about stories that are in like a log cabin or in a chalet or by the woods, or is there anything with a man with a white beard and a waistcoat in it?" And she kind of started looking at me a bit sideways, like, "No." So that was literally the only other thing I could think of where she might have gathered this story together. But it was such a abstract collection of things for her to put together and make into a story and then tell from a first person perspective. I can't think of any rational reason why it would be anything other than memories of something that had obviously happened to her before.
Wow. Oh my goodness. What a great story. I mean, and she was 4 at the time, is that right?
She was about 3.5. And that's what sort of links really with, so I have 3 children, and actually my youngest has never said anything even vaguely to do with anything other than the here and now. And but the 2 eldest, and my son at the same age, at 3.5, also said something that kind of blew my mind, but in a slightly different way. And I might say that, mention the fact that obviously when my eldest daughter was having these conversations with me, he was just a baby. So there was nothing to link, or inspire him, I would say, to talk about what I'm about to explain to you. But again, at about 3.5, my eldest was at school at that point. My littlest was a tiny baby. Dad was out at work, and we were sitting around the breakfast table, and he looked at me and he said, "Mummy, sometimes I really miss my old family." And I sort of looked at him and I said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "You've got me, you've got Daddy, and we're right here. You've got your big sister. I know Sophia's at school, but she'll be home in a few hours." And, sort of cajoling a bit. And he was like, no, not you guys. I miss my old family from, and I don't think he said from before. He said, "In my old family that I was with." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And again, I didn't want to kind of alarm him, and I didn't want him to think that I was kind of, a sconce. I wanted him to kind of naturally tell me whatever he was going to naturally tell me. And he said that he had a mum and a dad and 2 brothers and a sister, and they all lived together. And he said we all lived in the house together, and there was a war and there was explosions. I can't remember exactly how he said it. There was lots of noise and there was an explosion. And one day they were in the house and the wall came down, and I screamed and screamed and screamed for hours, but no one came. And then I came to you.
Okay, I don't know what to say to that. That is amazing.
It's just bananas.
That is so amazing.
Weird. Yeah, really, really.
I am just impressed. Those are 2 great stories. Now, how old are the children now?
So my son has literally just had his 10th birthday, and my eldest daughter is just about to turn 12. So quite a while ago, it's 9 years ago now, really.
Have you talked to them about this? Do they have any recollection?
I have. So I didn't talk to them about it in the sort of year or so after they first said it. Apart from anything else, I thought if anything were to come naturally, then it would lend a bit more credibility to it, but nothing ever did. But certainly by the time my eldest was about 8 or 9, I remember saying to her, "Do you ever remember talking to me about your father and the house by the woods?" And she sort of looked at me blankly like, "What are you talking about, Mum?" No. So she knows the story in relation to what I have told her that she said to me when she was little, but she's got no recollection at all. Complete blank. Just gone.
Amazing.
And with my son, he doesn't really recall either. Although he said some other very, very weird things as well, but I think that's a whole other campfire call.
Has this made you, I don't know what your thoughts about reincarnation were before these experiences. Has it informed that or changed that in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think I'd necessarily been, I was fairly agnostic, I guess. I didn't really have any particular set of beliefs, but certainly I, as a fairly rational person, you look at all these different things and you think, well, actually, how can this all tie together in any other way? How can these children have had these really emotional responses to telling me these stories if they were all completely fabricated in their own minds at that time? It seems to me that there is no other explanation other than the fact that they have a memory from something that predates our time together. So it absolutely has kind of sort of cemented in my mind the fact that I think that, this is just, one particular meat suit that we put on of many, probably.
I have to tell you, what an amazing story. Thank you for sharing it today on the Campfire.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me.